Hey guys, so a whole ton of new Senate polls were just released. I know we just looked at polls yesterday, but I mean today we got new polls from Ohio, Wisconsin, Florida, Kansas, and Pennsylvania. All of these races are going to be pretty important in terms of deciding the balance of power in the US Senate after these midterms, with the exception of course, Kansas. But I mean, in Ohio, JD Vance, for the first time in over 3 months, leads in a poll against Tim Ryan. Vance is up by 3% according to the Emerson College poll, as well as in Wisconsin, Mandela Barnes is leading by 7% against incumbent Republican Ron Johnson. We also have another state currently held by Republicans in which Democrats are winning in, and that, of course, is Pennsylvania, where John Fetterman leads by margins of 11 and 18%. And so in this video, we'll be taking a look at these new polling numbers and what they mean for the midterm races that we have in less than 3 months. I mean, these are going to be some big states, especially Ohio, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. And of course, Pennsylvania and Wisconsin would be major Democratic flips if their candidates are able to win. So starting off with the new Ohio poll, Tim Ryan's margin has gone down to just 1.2% according to 538, and that is because this most recent poll conducted by the A- rated Emerson College puts Vance ahead by 3%. Now, JD Vance and Tim Ryan are in a surprisingly close race. Ohio is, of course, a state that Donald Trump won by a significant margin in both 2016 and 2020, and the last time that JD Vance led in a poll was all the way back in May, and this was a poll in which he led by 2%. The poll was conducted by Suffolk and USA Today. So over the last 3 months over the summer, Tim Ryan has been doing very well in the state. However, these new polls really have not been that reliable. Many of them were funded by Democratic sponsors or they were online surveys. So the most recent poll here does give very good insight to this race. JD Vance ultimately is probably still going to come out on top in Ohio simply because he is a Republican. As a candidate, I mean, clearly he is not performing well. I think that the Republican Party did make a mistake in nominating him. I think that Josh Mandel would have even been a better nominee, but JD Vance only won 33% of the vote despite being endorsed by Donald Trump. The endorsement of Donald Trump is basically what helped the Vance end up winning this race. Before this, Josh Mandel was expected to be nominated once again. He was the 2012 nominee and lost to Sherrod Brown in that Senate election for the Republican Party. So in Ohio, this poll does cement the fact that Republicans are probably not going to lose this seat currently held by Rob Portman, who is retiring, but it is not impossible for Democrats to win a Senate election in the Buckeye State. In 2018, Sherrod Brown was reelected to a third term in office, defeating Jim Renacci, and of course, this was 2 years after 2016 when Donald Trump defeated Hillary Clinton in the state of Ohio by a margin of 8.1%. In 2012, for context, Obama won Ohio by 3%. So Ohio has gone through a huge transformation in just the last decade. In 2020, Joe Biden did not do any better than Hillary Clinton. The margin was basically the same at 8%. So Sherrod Brown winning by a margin of 6% really was pretty significant. However, if you do look at the polls for that 2018 race, you will see a very different story. Sherrod Brown was leading by double digits in most of the polls, almost 20% in many of the final surveys that were conducted, but in the end, Sherrod Brown only won by 6%. Really, only one poll was even close to this margin, and this was the A- rated Emerson College poll, which showed Sherrod Brown up by 6%. So my analysis for the 2022 race is that it is going to be close. I think that Tim Ryan is going to do much better than a generic Democrat in Ohio, but JD Vance, with the momentum that Republicans have with Joe Biden as the president, is still ultimately probably going to win. It is going to be a very difficult race for Democrats to win. If Democrats can win in Ohio, I mean, they will 100% flip Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, and North Carolina may even be very, very close. As of right now, I do still have Ohio as a lean Republican state. I think a 5% margin is a bit too high for JD Vance, but definitely a state that at this point in time, Democrats are not expected to win. And moving on to Wisconsin, Mandela Barnes leads by 7% in the most recent poll against Ron Johnson. Johnson is running for his third term in office, and his incumbency is going to help the Republicans a lot in this race. If the GOP had chosen a new candidate, I think that Mandela Barnes would have a much better chance at flipping Wisconsin, of course, a state that Joe Biden did win in the previous presidential election. And Ron Johnson is not popular in the state of Wisconsin, but he is an incumbent, and he is somebody that many of the Republicans in the establishment do support. He was at first not going going to run. However, after being persuaded by Trump and many of his allies in the GOP, he did end up declaring another campaign. And so I think that Ron Johnson is weaker than he has ever been. In 2016, his election was not really that close. I mean, considering how close the presidential election was, it was less than a margin of 1% for Donald Trump. Ron Johnson did pretty well. In 2010, he was also able to flip the state, defeating Russ Feingold, who was at the time the incumbent Democratic senator. And so in this year's election, I think that Ron Johnson, if he's going to win, he is going to do worse than he did in both 2010 and 2016. And the polling numbers for Mandela Barnes are pretty favorable. Now, polls in the 2020 presidential election for Wisconsin were terrible. Joe Biden was expected to win by 7 to 9%. He ended up winning by less than 1%. Joe Biden won Wisconsin by a smaller margin in 2020 than Donald Trump won it against Hillary Clinton in 2016. And so if you look at the 2018 polls for the Senate election, though, you will see that the polls were pretty accurate. Most of the polls had Tammy Baldwin winning by around 10%, and that's basically the exact margin that she won by. So that is why these new polls should be worrying for the Republican Party in some ways. Mandela Barnes leading by 7% is a big deal, especially in these midterm years. In the presidential race, yes, the polls were off, but in midterm years, polls tend to be a lot more accurate, even if Democrats don't turn out as much as Republicans. Right now, we're seeing the momentum on the side of the Democrats, and that is one of the major things that is helping them. You know, if you look at the generic ballot, Democrats now lead by 0.5% on average, and if you look at the 2018 race, of course, Tammy Baldwin won pretty easily with 55% of the vote. So just like Ohio, it is not impossible for Democrats to win by big margins in Wisconsin. If they run good candidates, they can win. Mandela Barnes is the current lieutenant governor of the state. He currently serves under Tony Evers, who I think does have a good chance at winning re-election. Definitely, if Mandela Barnes wins his Senate race, Tony Evers is going to win re-election as governor of the state of Wisconsin. So Ron Johnson, at this point, I do have him favored in the race still. I think that the state of Wisconsin is going to continue to be lean for the Republican Party, at least as of this point in time. If we do see new numbers showing Democrats ahead, I will obviously change that. But right now, Ron Johnson is still the incumbent senator, and in a state that Republicans are doing better and better. And of course, the state of Wisconsin voted for Democrats in every single presidential election, I believe, from 1988 all the way to 2012. And in 2016, that streak broke, and Democrats have only been barely able to win it back. And if you look at the 2022 Senate forecast on 538, Mandela Barnes now has a 39% chance at winning. His odds have gone up significantly in the last 2 months. I mean, at one point in time, Ron Johnson had a better than 3 and 4 chance at winning. Now his odds are 6 and 10. Next up in Florida, we actually just got a poll yesterday that put Val Demings ahead by 4%. However, the two most recent polls conducted by Center Street PAC shows Marco Rubio ahead by 11 and 7%. Now, Center Street PAC is basically SurveyMonkey. These are the online polls. That does not mean that they're inherently inaccurate, but calling voters and doing polls on the phone is definitely a much better way to sample people if you want to have a better rating on 538. So looking at these two most recent polls, Rubio up by 7 and 11 points. I think this is going to be a lot more accurate in terms of the race. Val Demings leading by 4% is very unrealistic. The Republican Party is not going to lose in Florida. That is almost impossible. In 2016, Marco Rubio won re-election by 7.7%, defeating Patrick Murphy, and in 2010, he defeated Charlie Crist, the former governor who was elected in 2006, as well as Kendrick Meek. So 2010, it was a pretty easy win for Rubio. Then he ran for president in 2016 unsuccessfully, ran for re-election, won pretty easily, and in 2022, with Florida as red as it's been in the last couple of decades, it is not going to go to the Democratic Party. Joe Biden did worse than Hillary Clinton in the state of Florida in the 2020 presidential election, and of course, in 2018, Rick Scott actually flipped Florida in that Senate election, defeating Bill Nelson. Nelson was running for his 4th term in office. He was first elected in the 1990s, and he now does run NASA under the Biden administration, but Rick Scott did win a pretty impressive election in 2018. This was pretty much the only impressive flip for the Republican Party in that midterm year. Looking at all of the flips on this map, if you look at the other 3 flips in Indiana, Missouri, and North Dakota, I mean, these 3 were pretty obvious in a lot of ways. Donald Trump won all 3 of these states by solid margins. In Florida, though, Trump only won by 1.2%. However, if you look at the national environment in 2018, Democrats were ahead nationally by a margin of 8.6%. This was just how well Democrats were doing with Donald Trump as the president. president. And in 2022, with Joe Biden as the president in office, we are seeing almost not that big of a difference. Democrats are still leading in the generic ballot, but Republicans are not up by anywhere near a margin of 8% nationwide. Now, if you do look at the 2018 map again, I mean, Florida really was the only impressive victory for the Republican Party. Democrats were able to flip both Nevada and Arizona, but that was not enough to offset the actual gain that Republicans had in the upper chamber after their first midterm with Donald Trump as president. So as of right now, Florida is not going anywhere near the left, and Val Demings is going to lose to Marco Rubio. So I do have the state of Florida continuing to be a likely state on this map. It really is not going to be one of those big deciding ones, but if Florida is close, it could be a bad sign for the GOP on election night. Florida is one of the fastest counting states, and it's going to have a major impact if Democrats can win here. But as of right now, that is very, very unrealistic. If you look at the 538 forecast, Marco Rubio has an 85% chance at winning, so still he is pretty strong, but Val Demings is not completely out of this race. And finally, in Pennsylvania, this is the big disaster for the Republican Party. John Fetterman leads by 11.5% now on average against Mehmet Oz. And over the last couple of months, John Fetterman's margin has only been expanding. Looking at the most recent poll release, this is by the A- rated Public Opinion Strategies. John Fetterman leads by a margin of 18%. Now, there was another poll that was also released showing Fetterman up by 11, but this poll was conducted over a month ago. And so this most recent poll, I mean, this just goes to show you just how poor of a candidate Mehmet Oz is. He's becoming even more unpopular, and the major issue for Oz is that he has absolutely no connection to Pennsylvania. There's no reason why Mehmet Oz should be the U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania. If he was running in New Jersey, that would make a lot more sense. That's where Oz has lived for a long time, and he also votes in Turkish elections. He literally went there a couple of years ago to vote, and so that just goes to show you that Mehmet Oz is not the right candidate for Pennsylvania. At least that's what many voters feel, and that is the point that John Fetterman and his campaign are trying to drive in. John Fetterman is the current lieutenant governor of the state. He's pretty popular alongside Tom Wolf. In 2018, Tom Wolf was reelected in the gubernatorial election by a very solid margin, especially for a state that Donald Trump won just 2 years prior. Tom Wolf won reelection by 17%, and at that time, John Fetterman was, of course, his running mate and the lieutenant governor. So after 8 years as lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania, John Fetterman is very well known in the state, and I think he is somebody that can win. This seat currently is held by Pat Toomey. He will be retiring. Pat Toomey nearly won in 2016. He did defy the polls, though. If you do look at the 2016 Senate election between Pat Toomey and Katie McGinty, McGinty was expected to win this race. Looking at the polling that was done, McGinty did lead in most of these polls. However, the margins for her were 1 to 3%, sometimes maybe 4%, but nothing like the margin that we're seeing this year, in which John Fetterman leads by double digits. And if you look at the 2018 race, I mean, you will see that Bob Casey's polling numbers and his actual results were not too different. In 2018, Bob Casey won his re-election by around 13%, and that was pretty close to what the polls had projected. Yes, most of them did still slightly overestimate Casey, but I mean, with John Fetterman up by double digits, he's basically guaranteed to win unless something drastic happens for Mehmet Oz and his campaign. So as of right now, I do have Pennsylvania as a lean Democratic state. I do not believe that John Fetterman, at least at this point in time, is going to win by a margin over 5%, but definitely a victory, and that is enough for Democrats to offset the advantage that Republicans have going into these midterms for the Senate. At least they're still probably going to lose the House, but Democrats, if they can flip Pennsylvania, they will only have to hold on to 2 of their seats in Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia, because obviously Democrats are going to win in North Carolina as well, with Maggie Hassan running for re-election. So flipping Pennsylvania would make the math a lot easier for the Democratic Party. And so there's no need to fill in the map. You all get the point by now. These Senate elections are going to be closer than ever. We are only in the 4th ever 50-50 Senate at this point in time. And if you look at these new polls, I mean, they only suggest some pretty interesting midterms ahead of us. J.D. Vance up by just 3%, according to Emerson College in Ohio. 3% is a very weak margin for Republicans in the Buckeye State. In Wisconsin, Mandela Barnes leads by 7%. This is the only recent poll we've gotten for this race, and it may suggest that Ron Johnson is much weaker than we previously previously thought. In Florida, Marco Rubio leads by 7 and 11%. These are some pretty realistic numbers. In Kansas, though, Jerry Moran's only up by 21. I think he's going to win by a much larger margin, more around the 30% range. And finally, in Pennsylvania, John Fetterman up by 18 and 11%. I mean, these polls are a big deal. John Fetterman is absolutely crushing it in the Keystone State, and it's probably going to be almost a guaranteed flip at this point for the Democratic Party. So the math right now for both parties is very, very close. Democrats lead in the generic ballot, but overall, they also have the higher chance at winning. Currently, 63% of 538 simulations show Democrats winning. In the House, though, we do see a very different story. Only 22 out of every 100 simulations, according to 538, show Democrats winning the House. And so that will be it for this video. We looked at the new Senate polls, and these polls really are pretty interesting. We're going to keep you guys updated over the next couple of months, so make sure you stay tuned. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Comment down below which party you think will win the Senate majority after these midterms. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't. Consider getting a channel membership for just 99 cents per month to gain extra perks on this channel, and I will see you guys in the next video.